Walk on your own. Walk on your own.
Sergeant, refusing to walk. Now stand up. Let's go.
Come on. He's assault. Huh?
12. I'm right here.
Oh, okay. Forget it. I don't get the argument.
There are 323 million people in the United States. 6.9 million of those people are under the supervision of adult correctional systems. Plaintiffs are successful in 54% of all federal civil cases. However, while there are 10 filings in court for every 1,000 prisoners, plaintiffs are only successful in 11% of these cases. Plaintiffs in prisoner rights cases fare worse than plaintiffs in any other category of lawsuit. The government has deliberately created a system to protect government officials from accountability with the qualified immunity doctrine and the Prison Litigation Reform Act. In the unlikely event that the prisoner can get the suit beyond the internal accountability prison system and into court, the prisoner has to prove that the officer was not entitled to the defence of qualified immunity. Under the doctrine of qualified immunity, a public official who is performing a discretionary function is immune from civil liability as long as the conduct does not violate clearly established rights. This immunity shields many cases from ever getting litigated and allows abusive prison guards to continue operating as they wish. Government officials skirt this issue and praise correction officers for their good work.
I want to give a special shout out to our prison guards. They've got a really tough job. And most of them are doing it in exemplary fashion.
There's something instinctively unsettling about the doctrine of qualified immunity, and tort law allows us to better pinpoint what exactly this is. Tort law allows society to hold its citizens accountable for the harm they impose on one another. In circumstances defined by the law, we owe each other a duty of care, a duty which, if violated, results in liability on the part of the tortfeasor. Even children may owe and be owed a duty of care. And yet, we treat prisoners differently. We have qualified the duty they are owed, reducing their liberty and constitutional protections. We treat them as less worthy of our so-called inalienable rights. The extent to which society is disempowering prisoners from asserting claims of abuse tells us something about the attributions we assign to prisoners. It demonstrates the view of society that prisoners act dispositionally, that they've acted with free will, choosing to impose harm on others through their crimes, and are therefore wholly responsible for their actions. Senator Bob Dole claimed that the Prison Litigation Reform Act would help to put an end to inmate litigation, fun and games. In other words, prisoners are sticks acting with bad motives. This attribution serves to legitimize depriving prisoners of fundamental rights through the PLRA and the doctrine of qualified immunity. The doctrine of qualified immunity and the PLRA reflect Mark Allick's notions about blame validation. Allick posits that disproportionate blame is often placed on those individuals or groups for which the associations are negative. In these circumstances, we exaggerate the actor's volitional or causal control. In contrast, blame is less likely to be assigned to those who are socially attractive. Accordingly, in conflicts between prison guards and prisoners, we tend not to assign blame to prison guards, who are socially attractive, and we instead exaggerate the role of the prisoner, for which society has negative implicit associations. Group enhancing attributions also underpin the doctrine of qualified immunity in the PLRA. Prison guards are considered part of the in-group, whereas the prisoners are very much part of the out-group. This creates the impression that prisoners act dispositionally. The reality is that more often than not, prisoners commit crime because of situational factors, including social inequalities. That is, they are bore, not stick. But we are reluctant to accept this explanation because that requires us to confront the uncomfortable reality that when people commit crimes, it is us as a society, not the individual, which has failed.
Bottom line is that the prison can no longer provide high-end hormones.
If I don't get my medication, I'm going through withdrawal. hot flashes, night sweats.
What do you want from me?
I want to see a doctor.
You can't go to the clinic unless it's an emergency.
This is an emergency.
Yeah, well, we don't see it that way.
Even if all of the hurdles that the PLRA throws at prisoners can be overcome, exhaustion, costs, physical injury, qualified immunity can still bar a prisoner from remedy. That brings us to Taylor v. Barks. Christopher Barks was arrested in 2004 for violation of parole. He committed suicide in custody. His wife and children tried to recover damages on the basis that proper precautions were not taken in light of Mr. Barks' extensive psychiatric history. The Supreme Court did not even consider the question. Instead, they held that since it was not clearly established that a reasonable officer would know that their conduct violated the law, the officer could not be held liable. The PLRA and the doctrine of qualified immunity has made litigation against prison guards almost prohibitively difficult, but there might be some political will to improve the laws. Strategic class action lawsuits against prisons and prison guards may capture the attention of politicians and the public. Perhaps an awareness of the most egregious violations will make it impossible to ignore the shortcomings of currently available legal redress.
We control it. You move when I tell you to move. You talk to me when I want you to talk to me. You understand what I'm saying?
Some of the things in Norway here, I didn't put it in there because I didn't think the American public would believe it. The warden's orientation talk that he has with each new prisoner is, we don't have the death penalty, we don't have life in prison. That means someday you're walking out of here and there's a possibility you could be my neighbor on my street. Therefore, I am highly incentivized for you to have a good life, because I want you to be a good neighbor.
Can we fundamentally reconceptualize the relationship between prisoners and prison guards? Affirmation bias and distinctions between in-groups and out-groups are not easily overcome. Any efforts to do so are necessarily incremental. We should be looking for better solutions, but most crucially, we must take on the uncomfortable challenge of looking within ourselves and asking how we erected those prison bars and turned our backs on our neighbours.